season for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2 Episode 6 review of the Scooby Doo Show. So last time I continued my 2025 summer special with a review Season 2 Episode 5 of the Scooby Doo Show. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a fun video to make. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 2 Episode 6 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled The Ozark Witch Switch, which was released on October 15th, 1977. The short synopsis of the episode is, on the night the gang choose to spend in the Hatfields' cabin, the ghost of Witch McCoy appears to turn the Hatfield family into frogs. So normally I would tell you guys what DVD I'm watching Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show on. However, sadly, Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show has yet to get any sort of physical media release. It's a shame. I wish it did. I wish we had like a Scooby Doo Show Season 2 DVD or a full complete series box set of the Scooby Doo Show as a whole. It would really be awesome. But yeah, just like I've done in previous reviews, in this review I'll be watching Season 2 Episode 6 on HBO Max. That's where Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show on. Thankfully, the entirety of the Scooby Doo Show is still on HBO Max at the moment. It's one of the few Scooby Doo stuff, media that hasn't been axed off of HBO Max yet, which is good. I don't know why HBO Max took all that Scooby Doo content off, but thankfully Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show is still on there. So that's my recommended and preferred viewing on the episode and where you should watch it, basically. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I'm not really sure how fans feel about this particular episode. Like I've said in many Scooby Doo Show reviews, I haven't heard many people in the Scooby Doo community talk about a lot of these episodes. And this is one of those episodes. It's not an episode that I hear talked about. So that either means that it's not good, or it might be average, or it could be a hidden gem that hasn't been uncovered yet and maybe isn't talked about. But which side of the fence do I fall upon? Do I think this is an underrated gem that's a good episode? Do I think it's average? Or do I think it's forgotten for a reason and is a bad episode? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the Scooby Doo Show. The episode begins on a dark and stormy night, where the gang is heading to the Ozark River to camp and go rafting the following morning, when they blow all 4 tires on a deserted back road in the middle of the woods. After deciding to find somewhere to stay tonight, they spot an old cabin standing in the woods and knock on the door. A man answers and lets the gang in reluctantly, where they are welcomed by his family. They introduce themselves as the Hatfield family, explaining that they have been staying in the old McCoy cabin for about a year. They tell the gang that they have been haunted by the ghost of Witch McCoy, who has been threatening to get vengeance by turning the family into frogs and lizards. Apparently, Witch McCoy was hung for witchcraft 100 years ago. The witch has been trying to drive the Hatfields out of the cabin because of a feud with her kinfolk. That night, as the gang gets some sleep, Witch McCoy makes an appearance and warns the gang that if they don't leave the cabin, they are doomed, and then disappears in a puff of smoke. After hearing Ma Hatfield scream in terror, the gang investigate and they discover that the witch has transformed Pa Hatfield into a frog. Mystery Inc. gets to work and starts looking for clues. They split up and Scooby and Shaggy go into town while Fred and the girls search the woods. Scooby and Shaggy, along with the frog, who is Pa Hatfield, search the nearby town of Spooky Hollow for help. They find a phone in a general store, but before they can call for help, the owner of the store, Aggie Wilkins, appears and scolds them. Scooby and Shaggy explain the situation to her, and Aggie lets them use the phone, but the wire is cut. Aggie warns them to stay away from Witch McCoy and tells them about her cave on Spider Mountain. The witch, who is transformed into a cat, appears, prompting Scooby and Shaggy to flee. Meanwhile, Fred, Daphne, and Velma discover a zombie digging for something and chase him as he tries to flee. They lose him, and he vanishes into the woods. The gang reunite, and Shaggy and Scooby tell the gang everything that Aggie told them about the witch, and the gang decides to investigate the witch's cave. They head to Spider Mountain and find strange impressions in the ground. They split up, and Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby find the witch's cave, and upon entrance, they discover the witch's lair. They find several books about witchcraft, including a spell book that has a strange spell about nails, boards, and a string, and it sounds somewhat like directions on how to do something or where to go. The witch appears, and Velma, Scooby, and Shaggy hide. They try and outsmart the witch, but they fail. The witch takes Velma, Scooby, and Shaggy hostage and tries to cook them in a stew, but they escape into a nearby pond. The gang return to the Hatfield cabin and discover that the witch has turned all the Hatfields into frogs. They also find a mound of sawdust, and when they look at the strange impressions in the ground, Velma figures out it is Morse code. Velma deduces the meaning of the spell in the book, and they begin to look around the Hatfield's cabin. Using the directions in the spell, they discover the last piece to the mystery, something carved on a board. They change the carving on the board and fool both the witch and the zombie, as they have been going after the same thing all along. They manage to trap both the witch and the zombie by pretending to be the ghosts of the Hatfields, and scaring the witch into her own trap. The zombie then tries to escape, but they capture him as well. I enjoy this final trap sequence. I like seeing the gang, work as a team, and, not being like Shaggy and Scooby being the bait, or Velma and Daphne being the bait for, the two villains. Instead, they all get to participate, and they all help capture the villain in their own way, and I love that. I love the way they capture both of the villains, and how they work as a team.
No, you don't. It's mine.
You? But that's impossible. Where did you come from?
You thought you'd never see me again.
Who are you?
We are the ghosts of the Hatfields.
Us ghosts, Hatfields, have come out of the past to turn Witch McCoy to a frog at last.
No, not me. No.
Wicked demons of mist and fog, change this witch into a frog.
Not that. Not a frog. He did it. I'm a frog. Oh, please, don't leave me like this. Turn me back to my normal self. Please.
I'm getting out of here.
Yikes, the zombie's escaping.
I'll get him. I told you I'd get him.
The zombie is revealed to be Zeke Harkins, a bank robber who recently broke out of prison. And the witch is revealed to be Aggie Wilkins, who also happens to be Zeke's ex-girlfriend. Zeke had buried the money from the bank a while back, which was $500,000. Aggie found directions to the carving on the board in the cabin, which was a map that told how to get to the money in his old spell book, and planned to take the money for herself. But the Hatfields moved in, and Aggie had to get rid of them by making up the witch legend. She used her pet cat to make them think that she could turn into a witch. Zeke broke out of prison when he learned that Aggie discovered the directions and returned to the location of the money to try and retrieve it before Aggie could. The sheriff asked what happened to the Hatfields. The Morse code in the dirt was made by the Hatfields as a clue to their location, and the sawdust in the cabin along with the Morse code SM proved the Hatfields were hidden at the sawmill. Back at the cabin, the Hatfields have returned home and congratulate the gang for solving the mystery. Ma Hatfield tells them that the award they deserve is a big feast. Shaggy and Scooby Doo immediately run to the dinner table, but just when they are about to dig in, multiple barn animals appear and start eating the feast. The episode ends with the Hatfields immediately laughing about it, and so do Shaggy and Scooby Doo, as Scooby Doo says his famous catchphrase. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 6 of the Scooby Doo Show 1 star out of 5. Yeah, this wasn't a great episode. It was a really poor and bad episode. Very dull one as well. I can see why I don't go back to this one. It's a very repetitive and bland episode. Not a great episode in my books. Just a lot of problems with the episode. Obviously, it's not devoid of any positives. There are some positives that I do have for the episode, but for the most part, this episode is just filled with a lot of negatives, mainly stuff that just feels very dull or repetitive or a lack of certain elements. Just all the elements are weak in this episode, a lot of them actually, and yeah, it's a contender for one of the worst of the series. Definitely a contender for one of the worst in Season 2, with Chiller Diller Movie Thriller really fighting for that spot, really, for that spot, but yeah, I guess before I get into my negatives of the episode and why I consider this a really bad episode, I'll first go into my positives for the episode and what I actually did like about the episode. So starting with the positives, my first one is I think Fred was a good leader in this episode. I think he did a good job in this episode of telling everyone where they needed to go, what to do next. He fulfilled his basic role in that aspect, and I did like his trap at the end, fooling the two villains, with a false spot on where the money is, and scaring the ghost of Witch McCoy by playing her game and doing the reverse of, pretending to be the ghost of the Hatfields, and then making her think they turned her into a frog. That was really cool. I like that they got to play reverse the scenario and got to, turn the tables on her and essentially make her, scare her into a trap, which was cool. They only really catch the zombie by dumb luck, thanks to Scooby. So I don't know, if they had a trap in mind for the zombie at all, or if the trap was just intended for Witch McCoy. But it seems like they didn't really account, what to do with the zombie, which was weird. But nonetheless, the trap worked, and I did like it, and I like that they played the Ghost of Witch McCoy's game, and reversed the table, turned the tables on her, and reversed the roles, and essentially pretended to be the Ghost of the Hatfields, turning her into a frog. I think that was really cool. Then we have Daphne. Daphne was good in this episode. I think the thing I liked about her in this episode is I liked that she took a picture of one of the clues of the episode, which was the Morse code. I think that was great of her. That was something we hadn't seen before, and we see her develop the photo in the mystery machine, which was also something neat that we hadn't seen before. So it was good on Daphne's part to take a picture of that Morse code, because they probably wouldn't have stumbled upon that again. And it helped give them a clue on where the Hatfields were. So it was smart of Daphne to take a picture of it so that they could keep it for later. But yeah, I did like that Daphne did that. It was good instinct on her parts. And seeing the gang develop photos in the mystery machine, that was a nice little gimmick that we hadn't seen before. So I think that was cool. Next, we have Velma. Velma, I thought, fulfilled her basic role in this episode. She helped piece together the clues to help solve the mystery. I felt like as time went along, things were starting to piece together in her head, and she started to figure out what was going on. I think Fred did as well, but Velma more to the degree. And I did like seeing Velma throw her voice and try to, make Scooby believable as a witch. I kind of found it a little bit funny because, Velma threw her voice, Scooby was in this witch getup pretending to be a witch, and Shaggy did a little clap of the powder to make it look like magic, and that a frog appeared. It was kind of funny. I did like that. It was a nice little bit of trickery, and that Velma got to be in on the act, which was cool. But yeah, I think Velma, she fulfilled her basic role, and she did a good job on that front. Not one of her stronger episodes individually, but she did a good enough job to where I found her, decent in this episode. And last, but certainly not least, we have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby were their usual funny, cowardly selves. They had a couple of funny moments, like I said before, with the whole tricking the witch in her cave with the, Velma throwing her voice, Shaggy doing the, kind of the powder to make it look like, Scooby made a frog appear, which was kind of funny. There was a couple of funny moments from Shaggy and Scooby. It wasn't their funniest episode, but they had a few decent funny moments, and they were quite cowardly in the episode. And I did like seeing Scooby capture the zombie at the end. Like I said, I'm not sure whether the gang, just completely forgot to take the zombie into the equation when they were trapping the witch. Was there supposed to be an extra layer to the trap that we didn't see that was supposed to capture the zombie? Or did they just completely forget about him and Scooby had, it was just dumb luck by Scooby that he got, kidnapped and, trapped by the heroes. Because otherwise he would have escaped. And it is a bit weird that they didn't take into account, him at all. But regardless, Scooby did help capture the zombie at the end, and Shaggy and Scooby did fulfill their basic roles. They had a couple funny moments, and they were quite cowardly in this episode, so I enjoyed them. I also thought the gang as a whole were really great in this episode. This was one of those cases where the gang were more better together than they were individually. It kind of reminds me of a Fiesta Hostess and Aztec Ghosts, but unlike that episode, and I believe another episode that might have been the Gator Ghoul episode or some other episode earlier in Season 1, that I believe I said that the gang worked better as a team, but not individually. In this episode, they still worked well individually, but I definitely think their teamwork really shined in this episode. I love seeing the gang, work together in this episode. They really were they had great teamwork in this episode. Seeing them participate in the trap together and not one or two of them being the bait was really cool. And I love, how they, all these different gimmicks they brought in, taking a photo of one of the clues, developing it in the mystery machine, just all that cool stuff, and, working together as a team to figure out, the spell book, the directions in the spell book. And also working together to capture the villains. So the teamwork was on point, and I think the gang as a whole, not just individually but together, were really great. So the gang were definitely the strongest aspect of this episode. They were what really carried this episode. And my final positive is that I found Aggie Wilkins' outside of costume to be good. I like that she pointed Shaggy and Scooby in the direction of her cave in Spider Mountain. That was probably the only good thing that she really did, and obviously she had her cat, which, was a clue to her, a big, sign that she was possibly the villain, because the cat looked, identical to the cat that we saw earlier. And yeah, she didn't really set up Witch McCoy. That was really the Hatfields who did that, and she didn't really stand out too much other than just pointing towards the cave in Spider Mountain, which is where Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby found one of the vital clues of the episode. So I will give her a pass on that front. That was probably the only good thing she did, because otherwise, had she not done that, I probably would have considered her a pretty weak character overall. But that's all I got for positives, so I think it's about time to get on to the negatives of the episode, and what really makes this episode bad, in my opinion. So starting with the negatives, my first one is I think the villains of the episode were weak, in all honesty. So of course the main villains of the episode was the zombie and the ghost of Witch McCoy. A zombie-witch duo isn't particularly anything new, as we've seen this in Which Witch is Which, and a lot of that episode is repeated in this episode. There's so many elements repeated from Which Witch is Which in this episode. Then I think that's what hinders the quality and enjoyment of this episode, because it feels very repetitive of those elements, but doesn't really make them unique or fresh in any way or add any new layers to it to make it feel like a different experience to that episode. But yes, when it comes to the villains, besides the zombies' look, which is kind of cool, and Witch McCoy's laugh, I didn't find them particularly scary or entertaining. Nothing the zombie did or the ghost of Witch McCoy did was scary, and nothing the zombie or the ghost of Witch McCoy did was entertaining. So they ended up being weak villains, in all honesty, not just because they didn't really make much of a presence, but they also just felt repetitive to previous villains that were honestly done a lot better in Scooby Doo Who Are You than in this show. So yeah, I wasn't really a big fan of the villains. They felt very bland and repetitive, of Which Witch is Which, and I felt like the zombie and Which Witch is Which was much more of a better duo than the duo here. The duo here feel honestly lackluster and feel like it feels repetitive, and it feels quite weak, in all honesty. They don't have that presence like those two villains did, so yeah, weak villains, in all honesty, in my mind, in this episode. Outside of costume, we really don't know Zeke Harkins. He's basically a nobody until the sheriff arrives and basically identifies him as a bank robber who's the ex-boyfriend of Aggie Wilkins. But we don't know, who the hell this guy is. We hadn't seen him before that point. And you guys know that I hate whenever the sheriff has to identify who the villain of the episode is, who the guy behind the mask is. So, yeah, didn't like that. We don't know who the hell this guy is. He's basically a nobody before that point. I found the motive of the episode to be very bland and repetitive, in all honesty. So, essentially, the motive of Zeke Harkins and Aggie Wilkins was that they wanted to scare the Hatfields and the gang away, so that they could find the stolen money Zeke buried after robbing a bank. This is essentially the same motive as Which Witch is Which, and it's a very boring, plain, money motive. It's nothing special. There's no layers to it. It's like, we've done this before. There's no interesting layers to it to make it interesting at all. It's just a boring, plain-ass old money motive, and it's a motive we've seen before, and it's literally the same thing as Which Witch is Which. So yeah, not a very great motive, just very bland and repetitive. There was only one suspect in the episode, and that was Aggie Wilkins. We had no other suspects before that point. The Hatfields don't count because they're portrayed as victims and helpful. They're not meant to be, the villains of the episode. Nothing to indicate as such. So it's literally just Aggie Wilkins, and she's so obvious as the ghost of Witch McCoy that as soon as I saw her, I knew it was her. Based on, the cat and the way, how she was really the only suspect in the episode. So it was pretty obvious that it was going to be her. And then the zombie ends up being a nobody. So, yeah, they definitely needed more suspects in this episode to beef up the count and make it, give the audience a 50-50 shot. We had 2 villains, so three or more suspects probably would have, been good. 3 or 4 would have been good. Even more than that would have been good. But yeah, 3 at the least would have been a good amount, to help, make the suspects, have a good suspect pool and give the audience a chance to get a 50-50 chance to see who the villains of the episode could be. I found the mystery of the episode to be weak, in all honesty. So the mystery of the episode that I could find was that you want to know what was going on with the zombie. We obviously know the deal with the ghost of Witch McCoy, but what the hell is going on with the zombie? Is he a servant of Witch McCoy's? Is he up to, is he a separate being that has his own motives? Is he even after the same thing that Witch McCoy is? But the answers we get are unsatisfying, because we find out that yes, he's after the same thing Witch McCoy is, and no, he's not working with her, he's working against her. And honestly, it's just very unsatisfying answers, so it ends up being a very weak mystery. And for some reason, yeah, the zombie just, I found it weird that the zombie, tried to kill Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby at one point. He pushed the log while they were crossing or watching them. Unless if he was doing that to thwart them and the ghost of Witch McCoy, I really don't know what the point of that was. Because he was running away the first time they encountered. But yeah, regardless, the mystery aspect of the episode was there, but it was just weak, and we ended up with unsatisfying answers, so yeah, not a great mystery in this episode. There was potential, but they squandered it and didn't execute it as well as they could have. I found the clues of the episode to be weak, in all honesty. So the clues that we had in this episode was the Morse code that the gang found that Daphne took a picture of. You had the sawdust that was in the Hatfields, house when all of them were gone. And you had the book of directions that Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby found in the cave that led to the carved board. None of them pointed towards a suspect or a motive. They really just explained where the Hatfields were and what happened to them. But it didn't really explain, what the potential motive was. And it didn't narrow down the list of suspects. So while the clues explain what happened to the Hatfields, it did not, serve its basic function of either narrowing down the suspect pool or pointing towards, a potential motive in the episode. I found the atmosphere of the episode to be non-existent, in all honesty, so I felt no tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness at all throughout this episode. There was no hint of atmosphere whatsoever. Wasn't fearing for the gang's safety, wasn't on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. Didn't find anything about the villains or the setting to be creepy or eerie. So it ends up being a very, the atmosphere ends up being non-existent, and it ends up being, very weak in all honesty. Like, there's just no tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness from either the setting or the villains. It's just not there. There was no hint of it. So yeah, the atmosphere was completely non-existent in this episode. And my final negative is that I find the setting of the episode to be very dull and repetitive. So you had the Hatfields' home, you had the woods, you had the cave in Spider Mountain, and you have Spooky Hall. These are all so bland and repetitive. Like, we've seen all these kinds of settings before in Scooby Doo episodes, and nothing about them is new or fresh or interesting. They're all so boring and uninteresting and just repetitive of past Scooby Doo episodes. So the setting of the episode, while there were a couple, they were all boring and uninteresting. I didn't find any of them interesting whatsoever. They were, just very weak settings in all honesty. We've seen this before, and it's nothing new in the Scooby-Doo franchise, and they don't do anything to help liven it up or give it, any sort of personality to make it stand out from previous iterations and episodes of Scooby-Doo. So yeah, the setting was completely weak in this episode. I wasn't a fan of any of the settings of the episode. All weak, all dull and bland, and all repetitive. Overall, guys, I would personally not recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It's a terrible episode. It's a really bad episode. It's such a dull episode as well, with the only standout being the gang themselves. That's it. The gang were the only silver lining of this episode. They were the only thing good about it. Everything else was terrible. The villains, the mystery, the motive, the suspects, the clues, the atmosphere, the setting, everything was like just a disaster and not on point. And the gang were really the only thing that helped make this episode any sort of, had any semblance of good in it. But yeah, don't bother with this episode. It's very bland and repetitive. It just feels like a repeat of Which is Which, and it's just not one of the better episodes of the Scooby Doo show. So I would steer clear from this one. It's very dull and bland. The only cool thing about it is, the gang themselves and their teamwork in this episode, but that's about it. So yeah, don't bother. It's terrible and bad and dull episode. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you think I'm being too harsh on it? Are there more things that you see that I don't see? Do you consider this a good episode? If so, I would love to hear it. Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Are you like me? Do you consider this a terrible episode, a very dull episode that, has a lot of problems and is not a contender for one of the worst of the series and contender for one of the worst of Season 2 of the Scooby Doo show? Or you're somewhere in the middle where you think it's okay and average and decent, but it's not good or bad. I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby-Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I have more Scooby-Doo reviews on the way, Scooby-Doo TV show episode reviews, Scooby-Doo movie reviews, video game reviews and Let's Plays, book reviews, you name it, we do all things Scooby-Doo on this channel. So if you love all things Scooby-Doo like me, and love talking about all things Scooby-Doo, and, giving the Scooby Gang the love and attention they deserve, come join the channel, have some discussions with me, let's have some fun, and let's talk about our favorite Mystery Inc. gang. In my next video, I will continue my reviews of the Scooby Doo show with a review Season 2, Episode 7 of the Scooby Doo show, titled Creepy Cruise. This will be an interesting one. I remember actually liking the Creepy Cruise. Creepy Cruise was a pretty good episode if my memory serves correctly. I remember liking it. It's been a while though, so we'll see if it still holds up. But yeah, if you want to know my thoughts on Season 2, Episode 7, Creepy Cruise, come join me next time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Got it all together for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.